morning. It is great to be here. It is very seldom that I feel myself so welcome when I get invited to speak somewhere. But I have felt very welcome in Uruguay. It is truly a pleasure to be here. Today I'm going to talk about Estonian journey in terms of digital government. But first, Estonia. What is this place? Very few people outside of Estonia actually know anything about it. So, what is it? It is difficult to capture the spirit of an entire country in one picture, in one slide, but I still tried. This is a picture taken in early morning in June in Estonia. You get this golden sunrise, and it's just magic. It's beautiful. There's a lot of nature in this picture. However, if you think about it, the picture is taken in June, early morning, and it's cold enough to form a fog. It's a cold, rather damp fog, and it's a lot like Estonia. It looks beautiful, it is beautiful, but there is this rugged edge somewhere that you might find. So Estonia has a lot of nature, obviously, but let's talk about numbers. Comparing Estonia and Uruguay, when I prepared for this speech, I found it very interesting. With every fact I looked up, with every morsel of information I found, how similar we actually are. And you know, you can tell about the size of a country if they say that a country 3 times with the population is roughly similar. So we are very small. What I like about statistics about Uruguay is that you have actually much more space per capita than we do, which is a good thing. I like space. Urban population is higher in Uruguay, and but otherwise it is fairly simple, very similar. And this means that we probably have a lot of opportunities to learn from each other. Probably our challenges are very similar, probably our problems, our solutions, our joys are similar as well. Also, in Estonia, we do play football. A little bit. And in fact, that was the only connection I could find between Estonia and Uruguay, was the fact that a few years ago our national teams actually played a friendly match. And well, the trouble with Estonian football is that we can only just manage to win when the weather is horrible. So, you know. So that's Estonia. We are similar to Uruguay. That is Estonian context. But why am I here talking about e-government? Why is this topic important? I could be building software anywhere, but I choose to do that for the e-government. Why is that? Firstly, because digital government is just useful. It's just plain, simple, economic, practical sense. It is useful. And the basic way in which we see digital government being useful is that it reduces waste. And in the public sector, reduced waste means that the higher proportion of the taxpayer money is going to go to creating value for the taxpayer. And also less bureaucracy bureaucracy feeds on itself. So when you start reducing bureaucracy, you get all sorts of benefits. Less bureaucracy means less bureaucracy. And corporations have been using the Lean and Six Sigma and what have you techniques for years, for decades even, to make themselves more efficient, to reduce waste. Why not governments? And in Estonia, we see tangible, substantial, and sustainable benefits from digital government. It is really difficult to tell how much exactly are we saving. It is very difficult to tell what exactly are the benefits of digital government for Estonia, But because, well, we would need to have two countries side by side, one with digital government and the other one without it. And we can't have that. But very specific use cases very clearly highlight the clear benefits of digital government. So digital government is useful. But, a lot of things are useful. It goes slightly deeper than that. For us, digital government is the question of survival. It's very simple. We cannot afford not to get the benefits that the digital government brings. We simply would not be able to afford our country, our independence, without it. And this is a very, very important point that most of Estonians, most government officials in Estonia realize that what we are doing is we actually are helping the survival of our country. And talking to larger governments anywhere in the world, it is becoming clearer that while they still can afford not to get the digital government benefits, it is getting more and more difficult for them as well. So what is this digital government thing that is so useful, that is the cornerstone of Estonian independence? You see, information systems in isolation provide very little value. I once tried it. I had a server on my desk. It had programs in it. It sat there, didn't provide any value whatsoever. Information systems need context. They need some legal frameworks. They need organizational frameworks. They need people to use them in order to be useful. So let me give you some context about Estonia and how our digital government actually fits into that context. And by the way, I'm no consultant, but I use as often as I can the term digital government. Because in Estonia, what we have realized is that the government itself needs to be digital. The technology needs to be embedded in the government processes in order to be truly useful. So key parts of the digital government. You have concept. How do you think about our state? You have function. What does this country do for us? You have peopleware. How are people organized to provide those functions? We have software, obviously, and we have infrastructure. And let me go through those layers one by one. Yes, let's start with Estonians and their state. How do we think about our country? This is Singing Revolution of 1991. This is people. This is 250,000 of Estonians in one place. I still get goosebumps when I talk about it. It's just amazing. And somehow this is very Estonian thing to have. And why it is a singing revolution? These people sang. At this picture, this 250,000 of people are singing same song at the same time. It was Soviet occupation. And it was very clear that if you do a protest, and we actually tried that, this ends up in violence. And this is just not going to be useful for anyone. Political opposition was pretty much ruled out. So what is there we can do? We can't protest, we can't enforce political change, but we can gather in one spot and sing. This is something that is very tangible, very practical thing we can do. We don't protest, but we sing about ourselves. We sing about Estonia, we sing about our nature, our future, our past. And it is really difficult to argue that this is something forbidden, that you're not supposed to do that. It's very difficult to also argue somehow magically that not all Estonians think like that. If a quarter of your population shows up and starts singing songs about freedom, It's kind of clear. The nation wants it. So this is something that is crucial to understand about Estonians. It is our state. We made it. And you tend to trust your children. But high levels of trust are very, very important for digital government to work. You can always see people you can fill in the form, you can sign it, you can hand it to a government officer, and you can get it back later with lots of signatures and lots of stamps on it. But you have to trust the government in the digital world, because in the digital world there is no paper trail. There is no way for you to be actually sure what happened to your data you sent them. So trust is really important. And we do have that. Secondly, our history has led us to, let's put it this way, healthy skepticism towards the government. If you get 7 government changes, and I don't mean that if one party is replaced with the other one, but I mean complete regime changes within 50 years, at some point you're going to go, yeah, well, another government, well, but I still need to feed my kids. I still need to get my life together, regardless of who happens to be in power currently. And that is something that is very Estonian about our attitude towards our country, our state rather, is that yes, we love it, but we try to interact with it as little as possible, because we know that we need to be able to survive on ourselves. And bureaucracy takes time to bloom. It takes time. And other than the Soviet period, there wasn't that time in Estonia. All right. But what does Estonian state do? Okay, so we still spoke about how we think about our state, but what does it do? And this is where the theoretical framework I used broke down a little bit. Because what does a country really do? It's a kind of difficult question if you think about it. And I figured the best way to talk about it is to talk about where we spend our money. And so this is the rough breakdown of Estonian state budget. About a third goes to social security. The next 17% goes to something that I find very disturbing, the general government services. Government magically provides services for its citizens. I don't know what that is exactly, and that concerns me. This is the area where digital government probably can reduce the expenditure. This is where we can probably get that percentage down to 10 to 12 to 15. And this picture also shows that in many areas we have strong struggles because let's take the interior public safety and security, which is only 5% of the entire budget. Any IT expenditure there competes with the salaries of the policemen, the boots on the ground. And it's a very, very difficult choice to make. So this is what the Estonian state does. It is a very social-oriented state. It must be noted that the defense budget is fairly high. So we spend a lot on our defense. Given our neighbors and the history, that is something that we need to do. But this is what the Estonian state does, more or less. How do you organize this? All of this money being spent towards the state that we sang free, how do you organize this? And this picture, I mean, it was very educational preparing for this speech because I learned a lot. And I looked at this picture for a long time and it was really disturbing because about vast majority of the organizations, this is actually a count of government, different organizations, government and municipal. Vast majority of organizations we have in Estonian government are municipal, all sorts of municipal organizations. And only a very, very tiny fraction is organizations that actually, say, collect taxes or give education or something like that. And that means that in terms of digital government, we have a very strong long tail problem. there's a lot of small organizations with very small IT teams whose capability is going to be negligible in terms of digital government. There has to be a way for us to actually help these people in the municipalities. It's a massive problem for us. We are really struggling to get our municipal structure in order, but also support the structure that is already there. In the digital government world, what we have is we have 11 ministries, and the ministry is the unit of digital sort of governance. When we think about certain areas, we think about the Ministry of Education or Ministry of Social Affairs, and we sort of plan accordingly. So the unit of planning is a ministry. In those 11 ministries, we have roughly 50 IT organizations, and smaller and larger agencies. And they employ about 1,500 employees, 500 roughly of which is contractors of all sorts. And 5 largest IT organizations employ 500 people directly. This means that if you do the math, the smaller ones, 45 of them, are actually very small teams of 10 people or less. And again, 10 people is just too little to provide any decent IT service. If you want to have 24/7, let's say, system administrator support, that takes 4 people in the minimum already. Right? Those organizations build, maintain, and run 562 distinct information systems. Oh, okay. Maybe 563, 560 something. And the entire thing is curated by Ministry of Economic Affairs. As opposed to your setup where I understand that this organization has a much higher sort of mandate. We are located under the Ministry of Economic Affairs, and the division of work is such that they make the policies and we execute. It's an arrangement that creates tension, but healthy tension, and it works pretty well. And this is basically the mission of our agency. We are the protectors and architects of Estonian digital society. We have 2 basic pillars in our organization: protection and development. And we see that as a very, very important sort of point to make, is that you cannot protect something in the cyber world that is designed to be difficult to protect. You have to design the systems to be defensible in order to be able to defend them properly. Now we are getting to the area where my heart starts to sing, because now we start talking about software, because I'm an engineer and I love software. This is the overall picture of Estonian information system. The important thing to understand is that we have all sorts of agencies that retain complete independence. We don't really tell them that much at all what they should be doing, because what do we know about collecting taxes or educating children? But we do provide key layers of integration that actually allow us to talk about the single information system in Estonia. The name of our agency is Information System Agency, in singular. And this is an important point. The other 2 things to note are that the technical layers are flanked from one side by finance and portfolio management processes. In public sector, you have to have some stick and some carrot to drive agencies towards desirable policies. For example, unless you conform to this architectural picture, your project will not get funding. Or unless you behave well in the cyber world, you will not get funding either. Or you will get funding if you propose something that really fits well into the overall and supports other agencies. And there's cybersecurity on the other end that needs constant feedback from the layers and also feeds back into the technical architecture of what we are doing. And underneath all of it, we have information system registry. This is where my numbers come from, 562, because when I prepared these slides, I looked at the registry, and the report says 562 information systems in Estonia. By law, and this is again where information systems need to work in legal context, by law, you cannot have an information system or a registry in Estonia unless it's in the public sector, unless it's in that registry. It is compulsory to register, and that registration is subject to approval processes by information security people, by the people who do data protection, and so forth. Let's talk about these layers a little bit more detail. Electronic identity is very similar to what you have here. It's using public key infrastructure. In our case, in Estonian case, the certification authority is actually outside of the government. It's a private institution. The certificates live on a chip. The chip can either be on the card or on the SIM card that's in your phone. The digital signature is legal equivalent to the physical one. And that's, again, a connection between technology and the legal world. I don't think we would have the eID penetration we have now if it wasn't for that provision in the law. The card itself doesn't contain anything. The certificates contain the ID code of a citizen, and that's it. Some countries put biometrics on the card or medical records or something like that. We don't. There's just a certificate that can be used to authenticate or sign digitally. And we also have a bank-driven federated authentication theme that is part of the electronic identity layer that the customers can use to interact with the government. The delivery channels that, if you remember the picture, sit directly underneath the electronic identity. The citizen authenticates themselves somehow and then interacts with the government somehow. And delivery channels do the interaction part. This is where our biggest challenge lies. What we tried to do in the beginning was to build a central government portal. And it is a really logical thing to do. It really makes sense. The agencies have no idea how to build usable services. The agencies don't want to think about the customer, about the taxpayer as a customer, so we build the services for them. And we did. And we have done it to an extent that we have 800 services available in that central portal. More than 800, in fact. And those are all sorts of services. Some are simple formulars where you fill in the data and the document gets sent. Some are more complex business processes. But the problem is that the solution is not scalable. It takes a lot of manpower to take care of 800 services, to make sure that they all work, that they all look nice, that they're all up to date to the legislation, that they all talk nicely to the actual process owners of the services. And now we're trying to figure out the way, how do we actually get away from central government portal in a way that still retains the good user experience. Because maintaining 800 plus services centrally from one team just does not work. We would need much more people, and the taxpayer is not willing to pay for that. And these are the two key challenges we have there. Firstly, maintain service ownership. And secondly, to get people to think about the taxpayer as a customer. I don't know how it is over here, but in Estonia, when I talk about these things, that there's a customer, I often get blank looks. What do you mean, a customer? Somehow it is very deep in the public servant to be a public servant, but whom to serve, that sometimes gets forgotten. Our mobile penetration is very small in a sense that, of course, everybody has a mobile phone, but the services are not necessarily tailored to be consumed on the mobiles. And this is another challenge we need to work on. Integration layer. If you remember the picture, this is that This is the layer that actually provides the delivery channel services and integrates all of the agencies together. We have something that we call X-Road. It is a pretty complicated system to explain in a couple of words because it doesn't resemble anything much. It is built in a way that all communication happens peer-to-peer. Agency A wants to talk to agency B, they talk to each other. What this creates, it creates freedom for the agencies to actually work and use that infrastructure. If these two agencies want to talk to each other, they can. There is no central authority involved. They don't need to come to us to tweak something or add permissions or anything like that. They can just go about building the services and deploying them and just getting down to the business. Also, we have done it so that there is no central authority that can, in theory, look at the traffic that goes back and forth, because that traffic is going to contain sensitive data. This is a deliberate design decision we made. Also, there's the angle that a centralized system based on our calculation is actually much more expensive to maintain and operate. Because if the central system goes down, all the services disappear in Estonia, effectively. And that would be a bad thing, considering how dependent we are on the e-services. X-Road provides standardized way to encrypt communication. It provides a standard way to provide access and identity control so that when agency A says that agency B is supposed to be able to access this or that service, they can know who that agency B is. They do service discovery so that agency A doesn't need to really care about where that agency B physically exists. They do audit logging, meaning that the agencies actually have no way to refute the fact that this integration happened. And protocol support as well. This is really important. It is a slightly technical term, but what it means is that this de facto enables independence of agencies. One agency can be Microsoft, and the other one can be Oracle, and the third one can be this hippie camp of open software people. To each their own, as the saying goes. And X-Road actually enables that. Every agency is free to do as long as what they do is legal, but from the technological perspective, they can afford to do whatever they want. And the X-Road provides the assurance that they're still able to talk to each other. We have 2,600 services on X-Road available. Some are duplicates, some are obsolete. 2,600 is roughly the count. And the reason I'm saying that it's roughly the count is that, again, I don't know exactly. New services get added and deleted constantly. X-Road is not something that we dreamt up and it was perfect. We are constantly working on it. We are currently working on version 6. That means that there are 5 earlier iterations of X-Road available for us to learn from and to build upon. And X-Road de facto actually enables privacy and once-only policies. This is where usually people go, huh? What do you mean? You have a system that allows any agency to access any citizen data at any agency, and you claim that this creates privacy. How is that possible? But it is. The thing is that this means that the citizen's data is in a very specific spot. My tax information is only at the tax authority, and it doesn't move out of the tax authority. The tax authority provides access to that data, but that information is collected in a very, very specific, very specifically protected spot. And also, because of the audit logging of the X-Road, every time somebody accesses my data, there's a log entry. That log entry is public. I can take a look at it. I can see which agencies and why accessed my information. We call this the little brother approach. Sometimes it's said that the big brother, the government, is watching you. But we're turning this around. We're having the citizens, the little brother, watch the big one. And this is in essence also what once only means. Once only means that in Estonia, you can refuse to give government data about you that they already know. What do you mean you ask for my car's license and registration number? You already have that. You have my ID code. There's an X-road service that you can use to actually get my license plate number from the car registry. Do that. Why are you asking me for that information to record in your database, to get gates, to get privacy issues, to get risks? No. You go talk to that agency. Physical infrastructure. This is where everything begins. Everything. The virtual world of the computers is fine. It's very fun, but we need to eat, we need to drink, we need to live in the physical world, right? This is population distribution of Estonia. And what this picture shows is that firstly, there's just one massive concentration of population, which is the capital of Tallinn. And there are two smaller ones in two larger cities. But at the same time, it also shows that the country is uniformly covered. We can't claim that there are no people outside of the capital, therefore we don't care. We can focus on broadband in the cities. No, there are citizens living all over the Estonia. And that means that we need to bring internet connectivity and services and power and all the infrastructure to every single tiny village in every single nook and cranny of the country. In the forests, in the bogs, everywhere. And this creates a challenge. What this picture doesn't show very well is scale. You see, it's roughly 250 to 300 kilometers from end to end. And experts tell us that if you want to have really good redundancy in data centers, these should be placed 250 kilometers apart. Well, we can't have that. Unless we want to put one of the data centers next to the Russian border and the other one on an island, neither of which is a really good idea. So this physical, fact of life has led us to the idea that maybe we can extend the concept of the government. Maybe we can extend what it means to have servers in Estonia to abroad. And we have come up with the concept of data embassy, whereby we put certain databases, certain systems that are critical to our digital continuity in servers located in Estonian embassies abroad. Or in case of virtual data embassies, we place them in data centers that are hosted by friendly nations. This is something that we are just starting to the framework work has been going on for a while already, but now we're getting to a stage where we really need to figure out the cryptography and the technical solutions and the processes and the nitty-gritty of the solution. It's really one of the most exciting developments that we have. Technical infrastructure in terms of networks and server rooms and so forth is being expanded aggressively, which is a polite way of saying that it is in not a very good order. The thing is that this independence, that everybody can do whatever they want, leads to a situation where everybody, does whatever they want. And if you think about the long tail problem we have, that means that all of those tiny agencies are hosting their servers, I don't know where. And consolidating those pieces of infrastructure is really a difficult task to do. But we are undertaking that. Currently, the government cloud mainly consists of the network infrastructure, which allows us to do rapid incident response and also provides better connectivity between agencies. And we think about the government cloud as a combination of three things. Private cloud, where we keep things that we cannot hand over to public contractors. Public cloud, hosting your website in Amazon or Google or what have you. They can probably make a better job at it than we can. And then data embassies, which is the third this strange new concept. And digital continuity really is the strongest driver here. We we can no longer run this country without these services. We have been doing digital government for real, really seriously, for about 10 years now. And in 10 years, you actually lose the competence of moving paper. If we would need to switch back to tax declarations to paper, we would not know how to do that. But scalability and cost are also becoming an issue. At some point, what was that? Yes, we saw 2 orders of magnitude reduction of hosting costs when we switched to a public cloud provider. And this creates a very strong incentive to move to public cloud, but public cloud has its own risks, and it is really difficult to resist that very clear economic pressure to actually go there and ignore those risks conveniently. In the very end, I'd like to give you a few key principles that we follow. All of those stem from our mistakes, our errors, our stumbles. And I sincerely hope that what I've spoken about today helps you avoid some of those stumbles. So here are the key principles that we follow. Firstly, we need to start developing an ecosystem instead of software. In the beginning, the ecosystem was not there. There was nobody there in Estonia who was able to, or in fact in the world, who was able to build you software that does digital signature, or does X-Road, or what have you. Now the world is different. Now the service providers are there, now the integrators are there. They form an ecosystem, and our job should be to make sure that the ecosystem is sustainable, that it carries on without us, that we as an agency are not a bottleneck anymore. The channels layer where I spoke about the centralized portal is a perfect example where we have become that bottleneck, where we have failed to build a proper functioning ecosystem, and this bites us very hard. It matters relatively little what the citizen uses to authenticate themselves. What matters is that they are able to securely consume the digital services, that there is somebody there to actually provide those services, there's somebody there to actually helps build those services, that those services actually work together. That is important. Open standards, open processes, open software. This is really hard. Well, saying it is very easy. Doing it properly, this is difficult. We have realized through trial and error that openness promotes transparency. That if you want to really be transparent, you need to be open first. But in order to get feedback, you need transparency. And you need feedback to get quality. If in Estonia, a typical government tender process takes 6 months, you build software for another, let's say 6 months, and it's closed source, and this process is closed, and it's closed standards, and so forth, then you will learn in 12 months that you were wrong altogether in the beginning, that you based your work on incorrect premises. If the feedback is faster, you can learn faster, you can move faster. And the way to do that is to adopt open standards, open processes, and open software. We are trying to get away from homegrown standards and to move to real open standards. And this is something that might be an issue here as well. In the beginning, the big standards of the world are very, very complex, and trying to implement them is hard because they just solve too many issues. Therefore, it makes sense to move fast and build something very small, very handy, something homegrown. But at some point, it starts limiting you. You start discovering that you actually can't go to the conferences, you lack the bandwidth, you lack the development community, you lack the expertise of the global community. And this is where we are finding ourselves now. Small, specific, and practical steps towards a potentially hazy goal. Remember the story about the singing revolution? Well, that 250,000 people singing together is not exactly a small step, but it was something that we could do. There was no way for us to know whether this actually leads anywhere. none of us could actually imagine Estonian Republic as it is now. But we knew that we had to do something, and there was something that we could do, so we did that something. And this is something that goes through our IT development as well. We try to make small, specific, and practical steps. We have an understanding that in the end the vision looks like so, and maybe we're moving towards that. But that's in 10 years, that's in 15 years. What we need to do right now is deliver value to the taxpayer. What this does, it creates flexibility. Because we might find out that the goal we thought that was attainable, that was useful, has shifted. Some company in California invents this touchscreen mobile phone, and the world is different. Somebody leaks documents revealing certain processes, and the world is different again. We need to be able to react to that, and we need to be able to react fast, because we don't have the luxury of being large and moving slowly. We are very small. We are like the flea. We need to be fast to survive. So, small, specific, and practical steps towards a potentially hazy goal, openness, transparency, and this is something that I want to emphasize once more. Developing an ecosystem instead of software. It is very tempting to be the one supplying all the solutions, to be the one who is in the center of the going on. That is tempting. That works for a time. But at some point in time, it stops working, and this is where the shift needs to happen. Thank you.